Go ahead.
Uh, my question is on the burial of Jesus, when they went, from my understanding, if Jesus was beaten and had a crown of thorns put on his head, that when when you're buried, the blood would be considered part of the body. So therefore, he was put in a single shroud, put in the tomb. Why would they have to go back and wash the body and anoint it when my understanding that the blood is part of the body and they do not wash the body or anoint the body later? It's just put it in the ground or put in the tomb. So why would they have to go back the following day when that would be considered a Jewish burial in the first century and considered that like today as a Jewish burial?
Okay, Rabbi, you got the question?
This is one of the most brilliant questions that has ever been asked on this show, and it blows my mind away why more people don't ask it. People are very easily transfixed on the strange, striking contradictions in the passion narratives of like how many women were at the tomb. They get caught up in that, and they don't realize that there's something so shocking, so transparent about the passion narratives, and specifically the resurrection account is a complete fake and a complete fraud. We're told in both Mark and Luke, we're told this at the beginning of the last chapter. Okay, so there's an easy way to remember. Just know that at the beginning of the last chapter of Mark, which is chapter 16, verse 1, and in the book of Luke, chapter 24, verse 1. Okay? Just all you have to do is remember Mark and Luke. Now, John will clean this up. The most striking part of the nonsense, of the fakeness of the story, is that people come back to the tomb on Sunday to anoint the body, to put spices on a body, on a dead body. Why? Where do you even get this from? Mark, the earliest of the writers, Luke is copying his story essentially, had to come up with a plot device of how followers of Jesus would come to discover that the tomb is empty. I am sure that you have been to a funeral in your life. You have attended a burial in your life. Would you imagine burying a body on Friday and then remembering that there's something that the body had to be cleaned in some way, and then digging up a corpse 3 days later to wash, to anoint, to add spices to a body? Like, have you ever done this in your life? Ever thought about doing that in your life? That never happens. And why do you need to wash a body? Why do you need to anoint a body? Why? And why do you need to add spices to a body? From the moment a person dies, immediately the body begins to decompose. It's not just a person, any living thing. The moment it dies, decomposition begins immediately. Okay? So you're going to take a decomposing body and then anoint it? Forget about women being involved in a naked man's body. That would just never happen. That's the forget it. I'm not going to deal with the resurrection. That's not this part of it is the device. You need a device to get everyone to come back. Okay? I don't care how many women were at the tomb. People seem to make a big deal of how many women come to the tomb Sunday morning. That is like so minor. Like, why is anybody going back? Moreover, why would you dig up a corpse that's decaying and add spices or anoint it? Why would you have prepared spices and fragrant oils that you had already before the Sabbath, and on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they went to the tomb to bring spices that they prepared and to anoint the body? Like, they're going to take a decaying corpse and add spices and anoint it? Like, what? Why? Where is this in the Torah? Nowhere. Nowhere. But if you don't come up with something, then your story lacks a resurrection appearance, or at least an encounter with an angel, a man inside the tomb, like in the book of Mark. okay, who we presume is an angel who looks like a man. So there you got to come up with the most ridiculous story in the world. So where do spices come from? Like, where does this even come from? Or anointing a body? Where does this, like, where do they pull? Does it came out of nowhere? So it's not out of nowhere, and because it's not out of nowhere, it's going to even be a greater indictment against the church. Listen very carefully. Decomposition occurs to a dead person immediately. In the modern world, bodies until the burial are refrigerated in order to slow down that process, right? It's not difficult to understand. Okay? In the ancient world, refrigeration wasn't possible, and Jerusalem has really moderate weather for about 3/4 of the year. 3/4 of the year, it's very moderate or it's warm, and not it's. So Jerusalem's temperature, I'm guessing, ranges from 70 degrees to 100 degrees for about 8 or 9 months of the year. Okay, and it's very rarely 100. It does happen in the heat of the summer, but it's warm. This is not Chicago. Okay, it's a temperate, very moderate. It's great weather, but with no refrigeration, body decomposition begins. What happens then? The body then gives off an odor. There has to be preparations where you need a tomb, you need a burial place has to be dug, whatever it is, family has to come in. Traveling in the ancient world, let's say someone is being buried in Jerusalem. So let's say the relatives are up in the Northern Galilee, as an example. I don't know, from like the Northern Galilee to Jerusalem, it's less than 100 kilometers, but it's not much less. It says whatever. It just took time. Not you. If you were out of the country, forget about it. But it just took time. So what's happening until the point from the person dies, so the person is buried, body's decomposing, and of course something that is considered a bizayon hames, a disgrace to the dead body, is the body begins to give off an odor. Okay. In fact, the point that dead bodies give off an odor is in the New Testament in a different context, with a different dead person. So the writers of the Christian Bibles, you can see, were very aware of this idea that decomposing bodies give off a stench. Getting back to our story, what did they do? How did they solve this problem? Because it's very important that nothing is done to the body that causes that not only desecrates the body, but it causes something very undesirable. The kavod hames, respect for the dead, is very important. So it wasn't elaborate or complicated, but there were spices, very just strong smelling. There were all sorts of recipes for this, meaning very strong spices were used and were put with the dead body. Okay, so and those spices would mask the smell of the body. Okay, it's really very, very simple. They would at times, if it was very hot, in part of the funeral procession, they would have spices that people would burn. That means like whatever spices they would burn them and give off the smoke, and that would even, like, everything would just smell from whatever spice. That's the point. So the point is, until the body gets in the grave, you need something strong to ensure that people are smelling some nice spice rather than a decomposing body. And this is really very simple. Body is washed in a process called a tahira. Tahira is a custom, and it's a very serious thing that men perform on a man who has died and women on a woman that has died. Never, never, never would men ever perform a washing of the body on a woman who's passed away. This is considered, again, this is a desecration of the dead. Women would never be washing the the naked dead body of a man. Never. That would never, never, ever, ever happen. In every city where there are Jews, there's a Chevra Kadisha, there is a burial society, and there are women who are there to care for the body before burial, and men for men. That's it. That's the way it's done. Period. End. Okay? But once the body is decaying and it's buried, no one's adding spices. The story is so ridiculous. Like, why do you need spices? The body is already buried. Wherever it's buried, whether it's a tomb or whether it's the ground, you don't need to put spices anymore. And you're not washing a decaying body. It's stupid. I know I'm using terms like stupid, but I need to wake you up to this. This is the part that everyone misses. As I said, just look at the opening passages of Mark and Luke. John has actually fixed this up. I said this earlier in the show that John is fixing a lot, and he's going to have the anointing and spices all taken care of before burial. John's going to fix this part up. But these earlier Gospels, it's so transparent that this stuff is fake. Like, why do you add spices to a body? Like, you didn't have a chance to do it before, but the whole point is before burial to put spices there for what? There's no commandment. There's no commandment in the Bible to put spices on a body. None. Let me say, there's 630 commandments. None of them is add spices to a body. It was done, but the point was to do that prior to burial. Once it's buried, then there's no issue of smell. There's no issue of masking anything. This is completely invented, and I think the church got away with this in a way because even those who are antagonistic to Christianity are so I want the right word here, distracted by the contradictions in the accounts that miss, I think, the most important point. The plot device of how to get people back to the tomb. No one goes back to a tomb Sunday morning. No one does that. Like, why? And I'm setting so much aside here. I forget about that Jesus predicted he would rise from the dead. No. I just want to go by what we are told explicitly in the book of Mark and the book of Luke. And it's just really, really explicit. You can go to the last verse of Mark chapter 15 and then continue 16, verse 1. Last verse of Luke chapter 23, which is verse 56. And just keep going through and you can see this is all in context. And then you have to ask yourself what are you doing? So the story is completely made up. It's completely contrived. It's fake. And that's the point. And I think that people who don't have an affection for Christianity or doubt Christianity find the problems in the contradictions. And the contradictions are shocking, really shocking. The one that's not that shocking is how many women were at the tomb. They're different, but you can easily explain that away that each gospel is reporting certain people, not others. There are people who attack Christianity and use the worst possible reasons to do that. This is what's important. That was a brilliant question. This is so transparent. This is so naked that these stories are completely concocted long after the fact in order to sell the notion that an empty tomb was found on Sunday morning. Thank you for your question.